If you won't sacrifice, you're not leadership material. Those words hung in the air of our open-plan office like a thunderclap, silencing every conversation, every keyboard click, every phone call in an instant. 30 pairs of eyes swiveled toward my cubicle where Marcus Reynolds, department head and self-proclaimed corporate visionary, stood over me with arms crossed and jaw set in that familiar expression of uncompromising authority. I felt the heat of embarrassment creep up my neck as the weight of those stares pressed down on me. 3 years of exemplary performance reviews, countless late nights, and personal sacrifices laid bare and dismissed in a single, humiliating moment. And for what? Because I'd finally drawn a line. But instead of the shame Marcus clearly expected, to see something else bubbled up inside me, something that had been building for months, maybe years, a sense of clarity so profound it almost made me laugh. I met his gaze and smiled. Not the apologetic, placating smile he was accustomed to, but something genuine and unburdened. "Noted," I said, my voice carrying in the silence. The story of how I got to that moment and what happened in its aftermath changed the course of my career and my life. But to understand it fully, you need to know how it all began. 6 months earlier, the Barrett and Associates downtown office gleamed in the early morning light as I approached, its glass and steel facade reflecting the awakening city like a mirror. I'd always loved this time of day when the building seemed full of possibility rather than pressure. At 6:45 a.m., I was usually the first one in our department, savoring the quiet before the storm of meetings, calls, and endless demands. I balanced my coffee cup on top of a stack of folders as I swiped my key card, making my way to my desk in the northeast corner, prime real estate with a partial view of the river and downtown skyline. I'd earned that spot through 3 promotions in 5 years, climbing from entry-level associate to senior account executive with a determination that had become my defining characteristic. My computer hummed to life as I settled in, pulling up the presentation I'd been refining until midnight. The Westfield account was our 3rd largest client, and their quarterly review was today. I'd prepared meticulously, as always, anticipating every possible question and concern. Barrett and Associates didn't become one of the city's top financial consulting firms by leaving anything to chance. Another dawn patrol, Alex? I swiveled in my chair to face Sophia Chen, our data analytics expert and my closest ally in the corporate trenches. "Just doing a final check on the Westfield deck. You're in early yourself." Sophia placed a paper bag on my desk. "Brought you a real breakfast. I figured you probably had dinner from the vending machine again last night." I peeked inside to find a still warm egg sandwich. "You're a lifesaver." And yes, dinner was a granola bar and regret. You know, in some countries, they have these radical concepts called work-life balance and labor laws, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. "Rumor has it, people actually see their families and develop hobbies." I took a grateful bite of the sandwich. Sounds like communist propaganda to me. Sophia laughed, but her eyes held concern. "Seriously, Alex, this pace isn't sustainable. When was the last time you took a day off?" I waved dismissively. "I'll rest when the Morrison proposal is done. Besides, the senior manager position opens up next month. 3 more years of this, and I'll be on the partnership track." "If you live that long," Sophia muttered, but dropped the subject as our colleagues began filtering in, bringing with them the familiar cacophony of morning greetings, coffee brewing, and computers starting up. By 8:30, I'd already fielded 2 client calls, fixed a discrepancy in the Westfield numbers, and sent out meeting reminders to the team. When Marcus strode in at 9:15, 15 minutes late to his own staff meeting, I had everything prepared. Marcus Reynolds had the polished confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. At 45, he still maintained the physique of the college athlete he'd once been, his salt-and-pepper hair expertly cut to project authority without suggesting age. As department head, he ruled our division with charismatic intensity, inspiring both loyalty and fear in equal measure. "Morning, team," he announced, sweeping into the conference room where we waited. "Let's make this quick. I've got the executive committee at 10. For the next 30 minutes he moved efficiently through the agenda, barely glancing at the materials I'd prepared. When we reached the Westfield presentation, he nodded approval at my summary. "Looks good, Alex. I'll take it from here for the actual meeting." I blinked in surprise. "You're running the presentation? I thought we agreed I would lead it, since I've been working directly with their team on the new investment strategy." Marcus didn't look up from his tablet. "Change of plans. Jenkins is sitting in, and I want to make sure we stick to the high-level view. You'll be there for the technical questions." Jenkins was Barrett's CEO, a rare presence in client meetings unless major revenue was at stake. I understood the politics at play, but the disappointment still stung. This was supposed to be my opportunity to showcase my work to both Westfield and upper management. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll email you the updated slides." The meeting continued, but my mind drifted to the growing pile of slights and setbacks I'd experienced recently. Always the workhorse, never the show horse. I'd seen it happen to others before me. Talented professionals who somehow never quite broke through to the next level. Forever the reliable second in command. As everyone filed out, Marcus caught my arm. "Hey, I need you to take point on something else. The Morrison RFP just landed. It's a full digital transformation of their financial systems. Potential 8-figure contract." My frustration instantly gave way to interest. Morrison Industries was a manufacturing giant, and landing their business would be a major coup. That sounds perfect. When's the deadline? 3 weeks from Friday. I need a complete proposal with technical specifications, implementation timeline, and full financial breakdown. He handed me a flash drive. "Here's what we have so far. It's mostly market research and their initial requirements. The rest is on you." I did quick mental math. 3 weeks is tight for something this comprehensive. I'll need resources, at least 2 analysts and someone from the tech team. Marcus shook his head. "Everyone's maxed out with quarter end. You'll have to make do with what we have. Maybe Sophia can spare a few hours." He checked his watch. "I've got to run. Send me a progress report by Monday." Before I could protest, he was gone, leaving me with yet another impossible deadline and inadequate resources. It was the Barrett way. Promise the moon to clients, then expect the team to build a rocket ship out of office supplies and sheer willpower. Back at my desk, I examined the Morrison materials, excitement mingling with apprehension. This was exactly the kind of high-profile project that could cement my promotion to senior manager. If I pulled it off, even Marcus couldn't deny my value to the firm. "Let me guess," Sophia said, appearing at my cubicle with fresh coffee. "He volunteered you for another mission impossible." "Morrison Industries, full digital transformation proposal in 3 weeks." Sophia whistled. "That's at least a 6-week job with a full team. And I've got 3 weeks and whatever help you can give me when you're not drowning in your own work." I took the coffee gratefully. "Welcome to Barrett & Associates, where the impossible is just another Tuesday. I can give you evenings and maybe a weekend," she offered. "This one's actually interesting, and it gets me away from the Jenkins audit." "You're a saint among data scientists," I said. "I'll order in dinner." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and calls. The Westfield presentation went smoothly, with Marcus taking credit for insights that had taken me weeks to develop. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, answering technical questions with precision and clarity. If Jenkins was impressed, he didn't show it, beyond a perfunctory handshake as he left. By 7 that evening, the office had emptied except for the usual suspects, workaholics, deadline chasers, and those trying to impress management. I had spread the Morrison materials across my desk and 2 whiteboards, trying to map out a comprehensive approach. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason, my roommate since college. "Dinner's in 30. You promised you'd be home tonight, remember? Game night with the crew, I groaned, suddenly remembering the plans I'd made a week ago. Game night with friends was a monthly tradition I'd missed the last 3 times due to work emergencies. Can't make it. Morrison proposal just landed. Rain check? I replied, already anticipating his disappointment. The response came quickly. That's what you said last time. And the time before that. At some point, people stop asking, Alex? The words stung because they held truth. My social circle had steadily shrunk over the past 2 years as I prioritized work above all else. Friends stopped calling. Family gatherings were attended via hasty video calls, and my dating life was non-existent. I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to everyone. We don't want make-up brunches. We want you there. A moment later, another text arrived. Just think about what you're trading your life for. I set the phone down, his words echoing uncomfortably. What was I trading my life for? The promise of partnership? Financial security? The respect of people like Marcus and Jenkins? Still here? Speaking of the devil, Marcus appeared by my cubicle, suit jacket draped over his arm. Good. How's Morrison coming? I gestured to the organized chaos of my workspace. I'm mapping out the technology infrastructure they'll need. Their legacy systems are a nightmare. It's going to be a complete overhaul. He nodded approvingly. That's why I put you on it. You're the only one I trust to get this right. He set his jacket down and pulled up a chair. Walk me through what you have so far. For the next hour, I outlined my preliminary approach, while Marcus asked pointed questions and made occasional suggestions. Despite my frustrations with him, I couldn't deny his strategic mind was impressive. He saw connections and opportunities I might have missed. This is good work, Alex, he said finally. This is exactly the kind of initiative that gets noticed, for senior management positions. About that, I ventured, sensing an opening. I wanted to discuss my candidacy for the Keller role when he retires next month. Marcus leaned back. You're definitely on the short list. Your technical skills are unmatched and clients love you. But, I prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification, but senior management is about more than client satisfaction and technical expertise. It's about leadership, vision, and commitment to the firm's success above all else. He fixed me with a significant look. Some of the partners have questioned whether you have that level of commitment. I felt a flash of indignation. I've worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years straight. I've brought in 4 major clients and retained every account I've managed. What more could they want? It's not just about hours, Alex. It's about attitude. You push back on deadlines, question resource allocations, advocate for staff over deliverables. He said this as if these were character flaws rather than reasonable professional behaviors. I push back when deadlines are unrealistic. I question allocations when they're inefficient. And yes, I try to prevent team burnout because it leads to mistakes and turnover. I struggled to keep my voice level. Isn't that what good management should do? Marcus sighed, as if I'd missed an obvious point. Look, I'm on your side here. I think you have potential. But you need to understand how things work at this level. The firm comes first, always. If you want to move up, you need to demonstrate that you understand that priority. And how exactly should I demonstrate that? I couldn't keep the edge. From my voice, Morrison is a good start. Deliver an exceptional proposal, on time, without complaints about resources or deadlines. He stood, retrieving his jacket. Show the partners you can make the impossible happen without making it seem impossible. After he left, I sat staring at the Morrison materials, his words ringing in my ears. The message was clear. Sacrifice. Everything. Time. Well-being. Relationships. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be deemed worthy of advancement. The next 3 weeks became a blur of 18-hour days, takeout containers, and too much coffee. Sophia came through with evenings, and a full weekend of help, bringing her statistical wizardry to bear on the financial projections. I reached out to contacts at similar firms for insights, called in favors from the technology team for architectural diagrams, and even spent a Sunday shadowing a Morrison employee, the brother of a college friend, to understand their operational challenges firsthand. Sleep became a luxury, exercise a distant memory, and my apartment merely a place to shower and change clothes. Jason left passive-aggressive notes about my unwashed dishes and unanswered texts, which I barely had time to read, let alone address. The proposal took shape, page by meticulous page. It wasn't just good, it was exceptional. I had identified inefficiencies in Morrison's current systems that even they hadn't recognized, designed a phased implementation that would minimize disruption, and created financial projections showing ROI within 18 months instead of the industry standard 3 years. 2 days before the deadline, I sent the complete draft to Marcus for review, then collapsed into bed for my first full night's sleep in weeks. I dreamed of the senior manager position, my own office with a door, a team to lead, a seat at the decision-making table rather than just executing others' decisions. He awoke to a flood of emails and texts. Marcus had sent the proposal to the executive team without telling me, and they had immediately requested a presentation the following morning. Not in 3 days as planned, but less than 24 hours from now. "Call me ASAP," Marcus's text read. I dialed his number, still half asleep. "What's happening with Morrison?" "Jenkins loved the proposal," Marcus said without preamble. "So did the rest of the executive team. They want us to present tomorrow at 8 a.m. "Tomorrow? I haven't even prepared slides. We need at least—" "This is our shot, Alex," he cut me off. "Morrison's CEO is flying in specifically for this. We present tomorrow or we lose the opportunity." I sat up, sleep forgotten. "Okay, I'll pull together a presentation today. Can you review it by end of day?" "That's the other thing," Marcus said, his tone shifting. "Jenkins wants me to lead the presentation. You'll be there to handle technical questions, but he feels a department head should front such a significant proposal." The familiar disappointment settled in my stomach, heavier this time. "I wrote every word of that proposal, Marcus. I did the research, the projections, the technical architecture, all of it. And you'll get credit for that work," he assured me. "This is just about optics for the client. They expect to see senior leadership." "Then maybe I should be senior leadership," I said before I could stop myself. A pause. "This attitude isn't helping your case, Alex. Remember what we discussed about commitment to the firm. This is one of those moments." I closed my eyes, swallowing my frustration. "Fine. I'll send you presentation slides by 3. What time is prep?" 7 tonight. We'll run through it once, then again in the morning before Morrison arrives. The day became a race against time. I created 40 perfect slides, distilling 300 pages of detailed analysis into a compelling narrative. Sophia helped with the financial visualizations, working through her lunch break to make the ROI projections irrefutable. At 2:58 p.m., I sent the deck to Marcus, then spent the next hour answering questions from the executive team that made it. Clear none of them had actually read the full proposal, just Marcus's executive summary that emphasized his strategic direction. At 7, we gathered in the main conference room. Marcus reviewed the slides with Jenkins and 2 other partners, making small adjustments to the narrative. I noticed that my name appeared only once, buried in a list of team members on the final slide. "We should emphasize the proprietary analysis, methodology more," Marcus suggested, referring to the approach I'd developed specifically for this proposal. "That's our key differentiator," Jenkins nodded. "Good point. Make sure Morrison understands that this is Barrett's unique approach, not something they could get from our competitors." Neither man looked at me as they discussed my work as if it had materialized from the Barrett and Associates collective consciousness rather than 3 weeks of my blood, sweat, and missed game nights. The rehearsal continued until 9, with Marcus, growing more confident with each run-through. By the end, he was presenting my insights as if they'd been his all along, with occasional nods to the team's analysis when discussing technical details. "Good work, everyone," Jenkins said as we wrapped up. "Alex, you'll be prepared for technical questions tomorrow?" "Of course," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "I know this proposal inside and out." "Excellent. This could be a defining contract for the firm. Let's make sure it goes perfectly." With that, he departed, leaving Marcus and me to gather our materials. "Get some rest," Marcus advised. "You look exhausted." I bit back a sarcastic response. "I wonder why." He either missed or ignored my tone. "I know you're disappointed about not presenting, but this is how these things work. Your time will come." "When, exactly?" I asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "I do the work, you take the spotlight. How does that ever change?" Marcus sighed, setting down his tablet. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Alex. Yes, you did extraordinary work on this proposal. No one's denying that. But landing a client like Morrison requires more than good analysis. It requires relationships, authority, and a certain presence. That comes with position. A position you're preventing me from attaining," I pointed out. "I'm helping you attain it, the right way." His voice took on a patronizing edge that made my skin crawl. "You think I didn't pay my dues? I spent 7 years in your position before making department head. 7 years of building the skills and relationships necessary for this role." "Times have changed," I countered. "The industry moves faster now. Talent shouldn't be held back by arbitrary waiting periods." "It's not arbitrary," he said firmly. "It's about seasoning, maturity, and proving your commitment to the firm's values. Speaking of which, I need you to come in at 6 tomorrow to make some final adjustments to the financial section. Jenkins wants more detailed breakdowns of the implementation costs." The request, no, the demand, landed like a slap. After 3 weeks of nonstop work, after sending a complete presentation that had been praised by the executive team, after agreeing to sit silently while others presented my work, I was now being asked to arrive even earlier to make last-minute changes. "The financials are already comprehensive," I said. "Every cost is accounted for in the appendix, with full breakdown by phase and department." "Jenkins wants it in the main presentation, 6 pages, maximum, with executive summary for each phase." Marcus began gathering his things, considering the matter closed. 6 a.m., Alex. Don't be late." As he walked away, something shifted inside me. A tectonic plate of resentment that had been building pressure for years finally slipping. The landscape of my career, of my future at Barrett & Associates, suddenly looked completely different. I stayed in the conference room long after Marcus left, staring at the presentation on my laptop. My name, buried on that final slide, seemed to mock me. 3 years of sacrifices, of missed dinners and canceled vacations and strained migraines, distilled into a footnote. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "You alive? Haven't seen you in 72 hours. I texted back, "Barely. Big presentation tomorrow, then maybe I can rejoin the land of the living. We're having people over tomorrow night. Low key, just drinks and catching up. Please try to make it. Everyone asks about you." The simple kindness of his continued invitations, despite my repeated absences, made my throat tight with emotion. "I'll be there," I promised, making a mental note to leave the office by 6 no matter what. I finally left the building at midnight, the security guard giving me a concerned look as I passed his desk. "Working late again, Mr. Vega?" The Barrett. "Way," I replied with a tired smile. "Don't let them work you to death," he advised, buzzing me out. "Company will replace you before your funeral flowers wilt." His blunt assessment followed me home, where I found Jason asleep on the couch, an empty beer bottle on the coffee table. I covered him with a throw blanket and retreated to my bedroom, setting multiple alarms for 5 a.m. Sleep came instantly, but offered little rest. I dreamed of endless presentations where I couldn't speak, of climbing staircases that led back to the same floor, of watching from glass boxes as others took credit for my achievements. Morning arrived too soon. I dressed in my best suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, a power outfit I reserved for critical meetings. My father had taught me that presentation mattered in the business world. "Dress for the job you want," he'd say, "because people are judging you before you even open your mouth." I arrived at the office at 5:55 a.m., finding Marcus already there, reviewing the slides. "Good, you're here," he said without looking up. "I've marked the changes Jenkins wants. We need complete cost breakdowns for each implementation phase, with ROI calculations that show profitability by end of year 2. I sat down, opening my laptop. "Those calculations are already in the proposal. I'll extract them for the presentation." For the next hour, I reconstructed the financial section while Marcus prepared his opening remarks. At 7:15, Jenkins arrived with 2 other partners, and we ran through the presentation one final time. "Excellent work," Jenkins said when we finished. "Morrison will be impressed. Their CEO is a numbers guy. He'll appreciate the detailed financial analysis." I nodded, accepting the compliment that should have acknowledged my authorship of those numbers. At 7:55, the receptionist called to announce Morrison's arrival. We assembled in the conference room, with Marcus and Jenkins at the head of the table, me to Marcus's right, and the rest of the executive team arranged by seniority. Charles Morrison entered first, tall, imposing, with the confident stride of someone who built a manufacturing empire from a family business. Behind him came his CFO, COO, and CTO, along with 2 analysts who carried tablets and notepads. Introductions were made, coffee was served, and at 8:10 Marcus began the presentation. That should have been mine. For the next hour I watched as he presented my work with conviction and authority. He navigated through the slides smoothly, emphasizing the key points I'd identified, occasionally glancing at me for confirmation on technical details. To his credit, he did mention me by name several times as our lead analyst on this project, but the overall impression was clear. This was a Barrett and Associates solution, conceived and directed by its leadership. The Morrison team asked insightful questions, particularly their CTO, who challenged some of my architectural recommendations. I defended each choice with data and industry benchmarks, gradually earning nods of approval. When we reached the financial section, the pages I'd prepared just that morning, Morrison himself leaned forward. "These projections seem aggressive," he said, studying the ROI timeline. "You're claiming we'll see cost savings by quarter 6 and full ROI by end of year 2? "That's correct," I replied before Marcus could speak. "Based on my analysis of your current operational inefficiencies, particularly in the inventory management and supply chain systems." Morrison looked skeptical. "We've had consultants look at those systems before. No one identified savings of this magnitude." I pulled up a supplementary slide I'd prepared. Previous analyses focused on software optimizations. My approach addresses the integration points between systems. I walked through the specific inefficiencies I'd identified, quantifying each with hard numbers from their own operational data. As I spoke, I could see understanding dawn in Morrison's eyes. His CFO was taking rapid notes, occasionally exchanging glances with the CEO. "That's remarkably precise," Morrison said when I finished. "How did you identify these specific integration failures?" "I spent time with your operations team," I explained, "observing workflows, tracing data through the system. The issues aren't visible in the architecture diagrams or process documentation." Morrison turned to Marcus. "You had someone on site?" "I wasn't aware of that." Marcus looked momentarily flustered. "Alex took initiative to get a first-hand understanding of your operations. It's part of our thoroughness." "Impressive initiative," Morrison remarked, looking back at me with new interest. "Who would be leading this implementation if we move forward?" Before I could respond, Marcus jumped in. we'd assemble a dedicated team under my direction with Alex as technical lead. Another relegation to second tier, another opportunity to showcase my leadership abilities denied. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something hardened. The meeting concluded at 10:30, with Morrison promising a decision within 2 weeks. As they gathered their materials to leave, the CEO approached me directly. That was illuminating. "Mr. Vega, I'd like to discuss your findings in more detail. Perhaps you could walk our technical team through the integration issues you identified?" "I'd be happy to," I replied. "Just let me know when would be convenient." "I'll have my assistant set it up," he said, handing me his business card. "Direct line. Call if you think of any other insights about our systems." As the Morrison team left, I tucked the card into my jacket pocket, aware of Marcus watching the exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Jenkins was clearly pleased. "Well done, everyone. I think we've got this one in the bag." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Excellent presentation. The technical details were particularly convincing." "That's all Alex," Marcus said with a generosity that felt like too little, too late. His analysis was exceptional. "Good work, Alex," Jenkins said, finally acknowledging me directly. "This kind of detailed understanding of client operations is exactly what sets Barrett apart." With that, he and the other partners filed out, already discussing their next meeting. Marcus lingered, waiting until we were alone before speaking. "That went even better than expected. Morrison clearly values your insights." "Yes, he does," I agreed, gathering my materials. "I want you to lead the follow-up technical discussion. Show their team exactly what you showed Morrison today." I looked up at him, unable to keep the irony from my voice. "So, now you want me to present?" He frowned. "Slightly. Don't start, Alex. You know how these things work. Initial presentations are always led by department heads. That's just protocol. But you'll have plenty of opportunities to showcase your expertise in the implementation phase." "If we get the contract," I said. "When we get the contract," he corrected. "And when we do, it will be a major win for your career trajectory. The senior manager position would be all but guaranteed." The carrot dangled once again. "Work harder, sacrifice more, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get the recognition you've already earned." "I need to prepare for my 2:00 with Dalton." "Financial," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting his implied offer. "Right. Get some rest this weekend. Monday, we need to start on the Westfield expansion proposal. It's going to be another sprint." Another sprint. Another round of 18-hour days and missed social events. Another opportunity to prove my commitment to the firm's values. "Actually, I have plans this weekend," I said, surprising both of us. "I promised friends I'd be there." Marcus looked momentarily taken aback. "Well, yes, of course. Take tonight. But I was thinking we could get a head start on Sunday. Maybe meet here around noon." The old me would have agreed immediately, canceling whatever plans conflicted with work. The old me would have sacrificed yet another piece of my personal life on the altar of professional advancement. But something had changed during that presentation. Watching someone else present my work, hearing Morrison's interest in my specific insights, recognizing that my value lay in my abilities, not in my willingness to contort my life around unreasonable demands. "I'm not available Sunday," I said firmly. "I can start on Westfield first. Thing Monday." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Alex, this isn't just any client. Westfield is considering doubling their portfolio with us. The proposal needs to be exceptional." "And it will be," I assured him. "Starting Monday." "This attitude is concerning," he said, his tone cooling. "We just discussed what it takes to advance at Barrett. The senior manager position requires total commitment." "I am committed," I replied evenly, "to delivering exceptional work during reasonable business hours. My analysis, insights, and client relationships speak for themselves." Marcus studied me, as if seeing a different person than the one he'd exploited for years. "Is this about the presentation? Because I gave you credit throughout." "It's about sustainability," I explained. 3 weeks of 18-hour days for Morrison nearly broke me. I can't do that again immediately, and frankly, I shouldn't have to. With proper resources and reasonable timelines, we could deliver the same quality without the burnout. "That's not how this industry works," he said dismissively. "Everyone puts in these hours. Everyone makes these sacrifices. It's the price of success." "Maybe it shouldn't be," I countered. "Maybe we'd retain more talent and produce better work if we structured projects more efficiently." Marcus sighed heavily. "Look, take your weekend, but I need you focused and committed on Monday. The Westfield proposal is critical, and after your performance with Morrison, you're my go-to person for this." I recognized the manipulation, criticism, followed by flattery, the stick, and the carrot. It had worked countless times before, keeping me in line, making me grateful for crumbs of recognition. "I'll see you Monday," I said, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with his demands. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and calls. By 6, the accumulated exhaustion of the Morrison project caught up with me. I packed up my laptop, ignoring the unfinished items on my to-do list, and headed home for the first time in weeks at a reasonable hour. Jason was genuinely surprised to see me. "You're alive! And before midnight. Should I check for flying pigs?" "Very funny," I said, dropping my bag and collapsing onto the couch. "Is that offer of drinks and catching up still open?" "Absolutely," he said, his face lighting up. "Everyone's coming over at 8. You have time for a power nap if you need it." I did exactly that, waking refreshed and somehow lighter than I'd felt in months. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I changed out of work clothes into jeans and a comfortable sweater and joined a gathering of friends without bringing my laptop or checking emails every 5 minutes. The evening was exactly what I needed. Laughter, good food, and conversations that had nothing to do with client deliverables or implementation timelines. These were people who knew me as Alex the person, not Alex the work machine. They asked about my interests, my opinions, my life, not my projections or analyses. "I can't believe you actually made it," said Michael, a friend from college who I hadn't seen in months. "We were taking bets on whether you'd cancel at the last minute." "Harsh, but fair," I admitted. "I've been the world's worst friend lately." "Not the worst," he corrected. "Just absent. We miss you, that's all." His simple honesty struck a chord. I had been absent, not just from social gatherings, but from my own life. While I'd been climbing the corporate ladder at Barrett, I'd missed birthdays, relationships, personal growth, and countless moments of joy. "I'm trying to find better balance," I told him. Today was a start. "What changed?" he asked. I thought about the Morrison presentation, about Marcus taking credit for my work, about the realization that no amount of sacrifice would ever be enough. "I finally saw the path I was on clearly," I said, and realized it wasn't taking me where I thought. The weekend passed in a blur of long-neglected personal tasks, a Sunday brunch with friends, and even a trip to the gym. I didn't check my work email once, didn't take any calls from the office, and deliberately avoided thinking about the Westfield proposal waiting on Monday. When my alarm went off at 6 a.m. Monday morning, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, actual readiness to face the workday. Not resignation, not dread, but a calm determination born of my weekend revelation. I arrived at the office at 7:30, earlier than most but later than my usual pre-dawn appearance. Marcus was already there, pacing by my desk with an expression that immediately set off warning bells. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been calling you all weekend." "I told you I had plans," I reminded him, setting down my bag. "What's happened?" "Morrison happened," he said, his tone accusatory. "They called Saturday morning. They want additional information on the integration analysis. Specifically, they want it from you. They've scheduled a technical review for this afternoon. I absorbed this information, recognizing both the opportunity and the implied criticism. That's good news, isn't it? They're clearly interested in our proposal. It would be better news if you'd been available to prepare, he snapped. I had to tell them you'd call back this morning. It looks unprofessional, Alex. Like we're not giving their business the priority it deserves. The unfairness of this accusation was breathtaking. After 3 weeks of round-the-clock work on their proposal, after producing an analysis so compelling that the CEO personally requested follow-up, I was being chastised for taking 2 days to myself. I'll call Morrison right now and set up the meeting, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling beneath. What time works for them? 3 o'clock, and I need you to prepare a complete technical briefing. Jenkins wants to sit in. Marcus hovered by my desk, his posture radiating disapproval. I expected more professionalism from you, Alex. Going dark for an entire weekend when we have a major client on the line. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that lashing out wouldn't serve my interests. I'll be ready for the meeting. Is there anything else? Yes. The Westfield expansion proposal needs to be started immediately. I've promised them a preliminary outline by Wednesday. Wednesday? That's less than 48 hours. That's the timeline, he said flatly. Make it happen. As he walked away, I felt the weight of the impossible expectation settling on my shoulders again. But this time, something was different. The weekend away from Barrett's toxic environment had given me perspective I'd been missing for years. I called Morrison's office and spoke briefly with his assistant, confirming the 3 p.m. meeting. Then I pulled up the integration analysis I'd developed for the proposal, creating a more detailed breakdown that emphasized the specific issues and proposed solutions. Sophia appeared at my desk with coffee. You look different today. Less haunted. I smiled, taking the cup gratefully. I actually had a weekend. Slept, saw friends, remembered I'm a human being with interests beyond financial projections. Radical concept, she said, sitting down. Also, I heard about the Morrison follow-up. That's a big deal, Alex. They clearly see you as the expert. Try telling that to Marcus. He's furious I wasn't available all weekend to prepare. Sophia rolled her eyes. Of course he is. He's terrified. Of what? Of you. She lowered her voice. You built that Morrison proposal from scratch, identified opportunities their own team missed, and now the CEO wants to talk to you directly. Not Marcus, not Barrett's executive team. You. I hadn't considered it from that angle. You think he's worried I'll outshine him? I think he's worried you'll realize you don't need him or Barrett nearly as much as they need you. She glanced at her watch. I've got to run to a meeting. Good luck this afternoon. Show them what you've got. I spent the morning refining my presentation and fielding calls about ongoing projects. At noon, I took a rare lunch break, stepping outside the building to eat a sandwich on a park bench, soaking in the autumn sunshine and gathering my thoughts. 2:45. I was in the conference room, setting up my laptop and arranging handouts for the Morrison team. Jenkins arrived first, followed by Marcus and 2 other partners who hadn't been at the original presentation. This is an unusual request, Jenkins remarked. A client CEO asking for a technical deep dive from a specific team member. Alex's analysis was quite compelling, Marcus said, his tone carefully neutral. Morrison clearly recognized its value. Jenkins nodded. Let's make sure we convert this interest into a signed contract. Morrison would be a significant addition to our portfolio. The Morrison team arrived promptly at 3. The CEO wasn't with them this time, but his CTO led a group of 5 technical specialists. Their body language was engaged and curious, not the skeptical posture I'd seen in countless other client meetings. Mr. Vega, the CTO greeted me warmly. Charles was disappointed he couldn't be here, but he insisted we record this session for him to review later. I noticed Marcus stiffen slightly at this revelation. Morrison hadn't mentioned recording the meeting when he called. I'm happy to walk you through the integration analysis, I said. I've prepared additional materials that expand on what we covered in the initial presentation. For the next hour, I led them through my findings, explaining how their current systems were creating data silos, redundant processes, and missed opportunities for automation. The Morrison team asked insightful questions, challenged assumptions in productive ways, and gradually shifted from skepticism to enthusiasm as they recognized the potential of the approach I'd developed. This is precisely what we've been struggling to articulate internally, the CTO said as we wrapped up. Our executives knew something wasn't working optimally, but previous consultants just recommended software upgrades or personnel changes. The issue isn't your software or your people, I explained. It's the connections between systems. Fix those integration points, and you'll see dramatic improvements without massive disruption. And you're confident you can implement this approach? He asked, his gaze direct. Before Marcus could jump in, I nodded. Absolutely. I've mapped out a phased implementation plan that minimizes risk and allows for adjustments as we progress. Excellent. I believe Charles mentioned he'd like you personally involved in the implementation. That would be possible, correct? He directed this question to Jenkins. Jenkins smiled smoothly. Of course, Alex would be an integral part of the team. Not just part of the team, the CTO clarified. Charles specifically mentioned he wants him leading the implementation. His understanding of our systems is already more comprehensive than consultants who've worked with us for months. I felt a surge of validation, quickly followed by awareness of the tension radiating from Marcus beside me. Jenkins' smile never wavered. We can certainly discuss the specific team structure when we finalize the contract. Alex's leadership would be a key component. After the Morrison team departed, the conference room fell silent. Jenkins turned to me with an appraising look. Well done, Alex. Very well done indeed. Thank you, sir. I'd like to see that implementation plan you mentioned. Can you send it over this evening? I nodded, though the plan existed only as rough notes at this point. Of course. Excellent. Let's talk tomorrow about your role on this project moving forward. With that, he and the other partners left, leaving me alone with Marcus. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Marcus spoke. Why didn't you tell me you'd mapped out an implementation plan? It's still in development, I admitted. I've been working on it in parallel with the proposal. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Morrison clearly values your contribution. Yes, they do. You understand why I need to be cautious here, don't you? His tone shifted, becoming almost confiding. Having a client specify a particular team member is unusual. It creates potential issues if you were to leave or be reassigned. I understood perfectly what he was doing, attempting to reframe Morrison's interest in me as a problem rather than a triumph. I'm committed to the project's success. That's what matters. Of course. And speaking of commitment, I need that Westfield outline by Wednesday, remember. Just like that, he was back to issuing demands, as if the last hour hadn't happened, as if a major client hadn't specifically requested my leadership. I'll work on it tomorrow, I said. Right now, I need to finish the implementation plan for Jenkins. Marcus frowned. Westfield is a priority, Alex. Morrison isn't even a signed client yet. I understand, but Jenkins specifically asked for the implementation plan tonight. Fine. Send me the Westfield outline before you leave today, then. I need to review it first thing tomorrow. I stared at him, incredulous. I haven't even started it yet. I've been preparing for the Morrison meeting all day. That's not my problem, he said, his tone hardening. You had all weekend to work on Westfield and chose not to. Now we're in a time crunch. Something snapped inside me. All the accumulated resentment, all the unacknowledged sacrifices, all the constantly moving goalposts, it crystallized into perfect clarity in that moment. No, I said quietly. Marcus blinked. Excuse me? No, I repeated, my voice stronger. I cannot produce a comprehensive outline for Westfield by the end of today. It's not physically possible, and I won't promise something I can't deliver." His face darkened. This is exactly the attitude I mentioned when we discussed the senior manager position. Leadership means doing whatever it takes to meet client needs, not making excuses. It's not an excuse, it's reality. And real leadership would involve setting reasonable expectations with clients, allocating adequate resources to projects, and recognizing the contributions of team members instead of exploiting them until they burn out. Several colleagues passing by the conference room slowed, clearly overhearing our increasingly heated exchange. Marcus lowered his voice. "Let's discuss this in my office." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, gathering my materials. "I'll send Jenkins the implementation plan tonight as requested. I'll start on Westfield tomorrow and deliver a quality outline when it's ready, not before." "That's not acceptable," he said, stepping closer. "If you won't sacrifice for this firm, you're clearly not senior management material." The words hung in the air between us, echoing through the suddenly silent office. I became aware that several colleagues had stopped pretending not to listen, their attention now openly fixed on our confrontation. In that moment, facing Marcus's ultimatum with an audience of coworkers watching, I felt strangely calm. All the anxiety about advancement, all the fear of disappointing authority figures, all the desperate need for validation, it simply evaporated. I smiled, surprising both of us. "Noted," I said, my voice carrying in the silence. Marcus clearly expected me to capitulate, to apologize, to promise impossible deliverables as I had countless times before. My simple acceptance of his judgment seemed to confuse him. "So you'll have the Westfield outline to me tonight?" he asked, trying to regain control of the conversation. "No, I'll have it when it's properly done. What I've noted is your assessment of my leadership potential." I picked up my laptop and headed for the door. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an implementation plan to finish for Jenkins." As I walked back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in years, despite the charged atmosphere and curious glances from colleagues. For the first time since joining Barrett & Associates, I'd set a boundary and held it, regardless of the potential career consequences. I spent the next 3 hours finishing the Morrison implementation plan, creating a detailed roadmap that showcased both technical expertise and strategic vision. At 7:30 p.m., I emailed it directly to Jenkins with a brief professional note explaining key points and offering to discuss any questions. Then I did something unprecedented. I packed up my things and left at a reasonable hour, ignoring the unread emails and uncompleted tasks that would normally have kept me at my desk until midnight. When I arrived home, Jason was cooking dinner, the apartment filled with the aroma of garlic and spices. "2 nights in a row?" he said, feigning shock. "Who are you, and what have you done with my workaholic roommate?" "I'm staging a revolution," I said, dropping my bag and kicking off my shoes. "One reasonable workday at a time." "Well, vive la revolution. Dinner's in 20 minutes. As we ate, I told him about the Morrison meeting and my confrontation with Marcus. He listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to admiration. "You actually said no to him, in front of everyone?" I nodded. "It just happened, like something broke loose inside me." "So what now? Do you think he'll fire you?" I considered this possibility, which strangely didn't frighten me as it once would have. "He can't, not immediately, not with Morrison specifically requesting me for their project, but he'll make my life difficult, that's for sure." "Is it worth it?" he asked. I thought about the years I'd spent chasing validation that never came, sacrificing my health and relationships for the promise of advancement that always remained just out of reach. "Yes," I said finally. "Even if I have to leave Barrett, it's worth reclaiming my life." "I'll drink to that," Jason said, raising his glass. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, waking refreshed and strangely excited about the day ahead. Whatever consequences awaited my insubordination, I felt ready to face them on my own terms. I arrived at the office at my new, slightly more humane hour of 7:30 a.m., finding an email from Jenkins waiting in my inbox. Alex, excellent implementation. Plan, comprehensive, practical, and persuasive. I'd like to discuss your role on the Morrison project in person. My office, 9 a.m. No mention of my confrontation with Marcus, which meant either he hadn't heard about it yet, or he was saving that discussion for our meeting. Either way, I had work to do before 9 a.m. I began drafting the Westfield outline, approaching it with a clear head and fresh perspective that actually improved the quality of my analysis. By 8:45, I had a solid framework that would eventually become the comprehensive outline Marcus demanded, though not on his impossible timeline. 8. Precisely 9 a.m., I knocked on Jenkins' door, bracing myself for whatever awaited inside. "Come in, Alex," he called. I entered to find him alone, reviewing documents at his desk. No Marcus, no other partners, just Jenkins, which could be either very good or very bad. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I've been reviewing your work on the Morrison proposal. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it." "Thank you, sir. Charles Morrison called me personally this morning. They want to move forward with the implementation." Jenkins leaned back in his chair, studying me. He was very specific about his expectations regarding your involvement. I waited, not wanting to assume anything. He wants you to lead the implementation team. Not as technical lead under Marcus, but as project director with full authority over the approach and resources. This was unexpected. Project director was a senior management position typically reserved for those with at least a decade of experience at the firm. "I see," I said carefully. "And what was your response?" Jenkins smiled, slightly. "I told him we'd be delighted to have you lead the project. The client's confidence in you speaks volumes." "Thank you for that trust. It's not just trust, Alex. It's recognition of demonstrated capability." He placed his hands flat on the desk. "Which brings me to something else. I heard about your disagreement with Marcus yesterday." Here it comes, I thought, steeling myself for the reprimand. "He claims you refused a direct instruction regarding the Westfield outline." "I refused an impossible deadline," I clarified. "I'm actually working on the outline now, and will have it completed properly by tomorrow." Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "Marcus has a particular view of what defines commitment to this firm. It's a view that served Barrett well in its early days, when we were fighting to establish ourselves in a competitive market." "But," I prompted, sensing there was more. "But the firm has evolved. Our clients expect not just dedication, but sustainability. They want long-term partnerships with consultants who bring consistent excellence, not burnout cases who deliver in sprints and then disappear." This was not the conversation I had expected. Jenkins, the CEO who embodied Barrett's work-first culture, was acknowledging its limitations. "Sir, if I may speak candidly." "Please do. Barrett is losing talent because of these expectations. Brilliant analysts burn out or leave for competitors with more sustainable cultures. We deliver exceptional work, but at a cost that's ultimately counterproductive." Jenkins leaned forward. "Do you know why I've been at Barrett for 27 years, Alex? It's not because I enjoy 18-hour days or missed family events. It's because I believe in the work we do. We help clients optimize their operations, and in doing so, create value that extends beyond balance sheets." "I believe in the work, too," I said. "That's why I want to do it well, without sacrificing everything else that makes life meaningful." He nodded slowly. "The senior manager position Keller is vacating next month. You were being considered for it." "Were being considered." Past tense. Despite everything, the implication stung. I understand, I said, keeping my voice steady. Marcos believes your recent behavior demonstrates you're not ready, that you lack the necessary commitment to the firm's success. I nodded, accepting the judgment I'd known was coming since yesterday's. Confrontation. I disagree, Jenkins continued. I blinked in surprise. Sir? True commitment isn't measured in hours worked or personal sacrifices made. It's measured in results delivered and value created. He pushed a folder across the desk to me. This is the preliminary contract from Morrison. $15 million over 3 years, with an option to extend. They signed this morning, contingent upon your leadership of the implementation team. I stared at the folder, unable to fully process what was happening. You delivered exceptional work under difficult circumstances, Jenkins said. You identified opportunities our competitors missed. You connected with the client on a level that built immediate trust. That's the kind of commitment Barrett needs. Intelligence and integrity, not martyrdom. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your confidence. With that in mind, I'd like to offer you the senior manager position, effective immediately rather than waiting for Keller's retirement. You'll lead the Morrison implementation, and we'll transition your other clients to ensure you have the bandwidth to do it properly. The offer I'd been working toward for years, delivered in circumstances I could never have anticipated. Not as a reward for sacrifice, but as recognition of value. What about Marcus? I asked. Marcus will continue as department head, but with adjusted responsibilities. The Morrison project will report directly to me, with you as project director. Jenkins' expression turned serious. I should be clear. This restructuring isn't just about the Morrison contract or yesterday's disagreement. It's part of a broader evolution of Barrett's approach to project management and talent development. In other words, Jenkins had been watching, evaluating, and planning changes already. My confrontation with Marcus had simply accelerated the timeline. I appreciate the opportunity, I said, and I'm committed to making the Morrison implementation a success. I know you are. Jenkins stood, signaling the end of our meeting. One more thing, Alex. This firm needs leaders who understand that sustainable excellence comes from well-supported teams, not individual heroics. Remember that as you build your implementation team. I will, I promised, rising from my chair. Good, we'll announce your promotion at tomorrow's staff meeting. In the meantime, I suggest you finish that Westfield outline. Not because Marcus demanded it, but because Westfield deserves our best work. I left Jenkins' office in a daze, trying to process the sudden reversal of my professional trajectory. Instead of being sidelined for insubordination, I'd been promoted to senior management. Instead of having to fight for recognition, I'd been handed leadership of our newest major client engagement. Back at my desk, I found Sophia waiting with barely contained curiosity. Well, are you fired or promoted? The whole floor is buzzing. About your showdown with Marcus. Promoted, I said, still not quite believing it myself. Senior manager, effective immediately, and project director for Morrison. Her eyes widened. Holy shit, Alex. Wow. What did Marcus say? He wasn't in the meeting. I'm sure he'll have plenty to say when he finds out. Speaking of the devil, Sophia murmured, her gaze shifting over my shoulder. I turned to see Marcus approaching, his expression thunderous. My office, now. Without waiting for a response, he continued toward his corner office, clearly expecting me to follow like the obedient employee I'd always been. The old me would have jumped up immediately, apologies already forming on my lips. The new me took a moment to save my work, gather a notepad, and walk unhurriedly to his office, closing the door behind me. Marcus was standing behind his desk, hands gripping the back of his chair. Jenkins just called me. Apparently, you've been promoted to senior manager. That's correct, I confirmed. And you'll be leading the Morrison implementation, reporting directly to Jenkins, not through me. I nodded. That was Morrison's request, which Jenkins approved. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the chair. Do you have any idea how this looks? A junior team member refusing direct instructions one day, receiving a promotion the next. I imagine it looks like client satisfaction and exceptional work being recognized and rewarded, I replied evenly. It looks like insubordination being validated, he snapped. It undermines the entire management structure of this firm. Or perhaps it evolves that structure to better reflect the value different team members bring to our clients. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. You've been angling for this all along, haven't you? Using Morrison to bypass normal advancement channels? The accusation was so backward it almost made me laugh. I delivered work so compelling that the client specifically requested my leadership. That's not manipulation, that's merit. Merit isn't just about technical skills, Alex. It's about loyalty, team spirit, respect for authority, qualities you clearly lack. I'd had enough. Is there anything else, Marcus? I have a Westfield outline to finish and a Morrison implementation team to start assembling. He stared at me for a long moment, then seemed to deflate slightly. This isn't over. Senior managers still report to department heads on matters outside specific project assignments. I'm still your supervisor. Noted, I said, turning to leave. And Alex, he called as I reached the door, remember what I said about leadership requiring sacrifice. Sooner or later, you'll learn I was right. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I think we simply define sacrifice differently. You see it as surrendering your personal life on the altar of corporate advancement. I see it as making hard choices that align with your values, even when they're professionally risky. We'll see which definition serves you better in the long run, he said, coldly. As I walked back to my desk, I felt strangely at peace with whatever battles lay ahead. For the first time in my career, I'd chosen my own path forward rather than following the one laid out by others. The promotion and client win were gratifying, certainly, but the real victory was internal. The knowledge that I could stand my ground, set boundaries, and still succeed on my own terms. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulatory messages from colleagues, some genuinely pleased, others clearly calculating how my rise might benefit them. Planning sessions for the Morrison implementation, and finally completing the Westfield outline to my own high standards. At 6 o'clock, I closed my laptop and prepared to leave at a reasonable hour for the third consecutive day. A personal record in recent memory. My phone buzzed with a text. From Sophia. Drinks to celebrate your promotion. The usual place at 7? I smiled and replied, absolutely. First round's on me. As I gathered my things, I noticed Charles Morrison's business card still tucked in my jacket pocket from the previous week. On impulse, I pulled it out and dialed his. Direct number. Morrison, he answered on the second ring. Mr. Morrison, this is Alex Vega from Barrett & Associates. I wanted to personally thank you for your confidence in me regarding the implementation project. Alex, I was hoping to hear from you, and please call me Charles. After all, we'll be working closely together in the coming months. Thank you, Charles. I'm assembling the implementation team now and looking forward to getting started. Excellent. I must say, your analysis of our systems was the most insightful I've seen in 20 years of running this company. When you identified those integration issues no one else had spotted, I knew you were the right person to lead this project. His words warmed me more than any of Marcus's grudging acknowledgments ever had. I appreciate that. I'm committed to delivering the results we outlined in the proposal. I have no doubt you will. He paused. Jenkins mentioned there was some reorganization at Barrett to accommodate our request for your leadership. I hope that didn't create difficulties for you. I chose my words carefully. The reorganization aligns with my strengths and will ultimately serve your project better. It was the right decision all around. Good to hear. In my experience, the best firms recognize and elevate talent, regardless of seniority or traditional hierarchies. Another pause. Between us, Alex, several people at your level from Barrett have pitched to us over the years. None impressed me the way you did. Not just your technical expertise, but your integrity. When I asked who developed the analysis, you owned your work without hesitation, even with your boss sitting right there. I hadn't realized he'd noticed that dynamic during the presentation. Transparency serves everyone better in the long run. Precisely why I wanted you leading this project. Morrison's voice took on a more businesslike tone. Now, I've asked my team to send over some additional data before our kickoff meeting next week. Let me know if you need anything else from our end. After we ended the call, I sat for a moment, reflecting on the extraordinary turn my career had taken in just 48 hours. From contemplating resignation to receiving a promotion and leading a major client implementation, all because I'd finally set a boundary and held it. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Jason. Heard the news from Sophia. So proud of you. Meet you guys at the bar to celebrate? On my way, I replied. As I left Barrett and Associates that evening, I passed Marcus's office. He was still there, hunched over his computer in the dimming light, alone as usual. The sight didn't fill me with superiority or vindication, but rather a kind of clarity. I suddenly understood that his definition of success, endless hours, constant sacrifice, personal life subordinated to corporate advancement, was a choice, not an inevitability. I had made a different choice, and as I stepped into the cool evening air, heading toward friends and celebration rather than another night of solitary work, I knew it was the right one. The story wasn't over, of course. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, politics, and the weight of increased responsibility. But, for the first time in years, I faced that future on my own terms, with boundaries intact and values aligned. When Marcus had said, "If you won't sacrifice, you're not leadership material," he'd meant it as a condemnation. Instead, it had become liberation, permission to redefine what leadership meant to me, what success looked like, and what I was willing to give to achieve it. As I walked away from the office that night, I smiled, thinking of my simple response in that moment, of confrontation, noted. It wasn't just acknowledgement. It was the beginning of a revolution, quiet, personal, but no less powerful for its subtlety. A revolution that had already changed the course of my career and, more importantly, reclaimed my life as my own.